Earlier in the week, I did a video covering the patch notes for our second big January patch. It's now out in the wilderness, it's been released, and so I've been playing it, and I just wanted to talk about what it's like, what's improved, what's not, and just really ask the question, is it any good? And did they deliver on their promises? Well, let's touch on Panzerstorm first. Not everyone's cup of tea, but DICE had at least accepted that this map was not all that fun for infantry a lot of the time. So, to their credit, they've made a lot of changes, and on first glance, they do actually make a big difference to the infantry gameplay. First up, the F flag, or the swine farm, has been completely changed. It's nothing like it used to be. In the old version, there was one large building, but now there is another directly opposite it. This makes the flag much larger than it was before, and it offers up way more cover. Then between G and D, there's what DICE has called an oak valley. Way more cover to run along the side of the road with extra trees to help keep you concealed. In general, there's now a lot more verticality to walls and ridges, and what I mean by that is that they're angled up way more so you can crouch down, do the goblin run, and be pretty well hidden when moving between flags. There is now way more ditches and mounds along routes for you to dip in and out of for cover. Is Panzerstorm going to be a map that I love with these changes? No, I don't think so, but I have to admit these are good additions, and the fact that DICE have listened to the feedback and made changes accordingly is commendable. I think this is going to be a huge part of what live service means for BF5. Not only is it new content that we'll get on a regular basis, but it's also modifying existing content so it's fit for purpose and as good as it can be. Moving on, let's talk about the practice range and the two big additions to it, skeet shooting and the bullet drop markers. Let's start with skeet shooting, which in my opinion is the least important. First up though, the button to open up the test range is now right by where you spawn, which is really helpful. I wish that when you load it in though, you could pick a certain area of the map to spawn in. That would be ideal. Anyway, if you want to try out the skeet shooting, you need to head down to the shooting range and it's on the left hand side. Pretty straightforward really. If you start it, targets will come from either the left or the right and you need to hit them to get them to blow up. If you want to change up the difficulty, you can, and this moves the targets further back. As a bit of fun, sure this is good, but I don't see that many players getting a significant amount of use out of this if I'm being totally honest. The bullet drop indicator, which we'll look at now, on the other hand, is quite interesting. So if you want to practice your sniping, you can press the bullet drop button at the shooting range, and when you fire off your shot, it will show you a 3D representation of the path that the bullet travelled. And this is really useful, especially for new players trying to learn the mechanics of some of the sniper rifles, when they perhaps have different bullet velocities and drop. I think experienced players won't really need to use this, as I would say that most of us just learn bullet drop from feel and playing the game, but for new players and players who are trying to improve, I definitely see some use in this feature. It's kind of cool to look at too. The test range is improving, but I'd love to see a few more refinements in what we can do, like just being able to test out different specializations, better spawning, and even spawning in bots. That would be awesome. We know that DICE have had bots in these games for years now, so maybe they could give us them in the test range. It'd be pretty cool. And just a quick heads up too, if you were wondering where the new Stug IV tank was, because that was in the patch notes, apparently it's not actually out just yet. There was an error in the patch notes and some confusion about its release date. That wasn't really made all that clear, but the tank is in the patch, as in it's in the patch files, but the assignment for that tank is not available until week 5 of Tides of War. So there's still a couple of weeks to wait if you want to take it for a spin. In terms of core gameplay, I really feel that this patch has improved lots of areas of the game, and I don't say that lightly. Mostly they're to do with quality of life, things that perhaps weren't working quite as well as they should. Being able to join on your friends you'd think would be relatively simple, but thanks to a pretty annoying bug, if you tried to join on a friend who was either in a full server or a full squad, you could be left with an error. And I can thankfully say that this is now fixed, and I almost rejoiced when I tried to join on a friend. It's a weird bug to have had, but I'm glad that we've finally seen the end of it. And then we've got the vaulting and traversal system. This is a really complex system, even if it doesn't seem that way when you're playing. The amount of cover, walls, buildings, windows, boxes, debris on the ground that's around on a battlefield map means that getting the vaulting system perfect is always going to be an uphill battle, but DICE have consistently been working away to improve this, and they've definitely taken a step forward in this patch. I found myself getting stuck an awful lot less when moving over terrain. And when you vault now, when you're sprinting, you simply glide over smaller obstacles. It's not quite gliding, of course, but it's just a very smooth feeling movement. Not only that, but ledge grabbing has also seen a big improvement. Ledge grabbing has always been in the game, so when you're falling, you can press vault to grab onto a ledge, window, or whatever it is in front of you. Sometimes it can really save you or let you get to places that you perhaps couldn't from where you were. And this system now has been further refined, so it's not only more reliable, but you don't need to mash the buttons anymore. Simply hold the key and the game will automatically detect any piece of cover that you're able to grab. And I think it works really well, and the animation is quick too, although be warned, the animation is longer depending on the height of the fall that you've taken. DICE have done a really good job here with this. I mentioned this in my previous video, but they've also blocked players from going prone if it's not actually available for you. This is to avoid instances where players would go prone and be forced to stand back up because the game deemed that there wasn't enough space there. Right now though, there isn't any UI on screen telling you that prone is blocked, so bear that in mind, and apparently they are going to add in some kind of UI element for that at a later date, just for a bit of player signaling. One of the other massive improvements in this patch is the bipod mechanics. I know that the MMGs were already pretty beastly, but I'm sure that plenty of players have come across instances where you're just desperately trying to bipod onto a surface to shoot at people and computer says no. Even a surface that you absolutely should be able to bipod on. Take the bridge on Rotterdam for example, that's the perfect bipod height, but occasionally you would just move a bit too far to the left or the right and your bipod would disengage. Now though, the system is way more reliable, so the bipod comes out faster and smoothly and it stays where it should. Overall, the detection worked way better than it did in the previous patch. It's a solid thumbs up from me. This is a great update to the bipods. And player footstep audio, well, that got tweaked too, and I kind of like it where it is right now. I hope they don't mess around with it too much anymore. One of the biggest complaints that players voiced when the game launched was the inability to hear enemy players' footsteps, and with the previous January patch, DICE significantly increased the volume of those footsteps. It was like, turn the slider up to 200%. And you know what? It worked. You could easily hear enemies around you, but the problem was that it was a bit too much. The audio was so loud that you were hearing players that weren't even really that close to you, and it was a touch off-putting at times. It's like everyone was running around with clogs on. Now though, it's somewhere in between where it was at launch and the previous patch, and I was still able to hear enemies coming up from behind me, but it wasn't so loud that I couldn't hear myself think, so it's in a bit of a sweet spot right now. DICE are also trying to make a few other quality of life changes. The health bar at the bottom of your screen will now tell you or remind you that you've got a health pack if you're low on health and haven't used it. Not only that, but it now changes to yellow when you're healing, so that it's really obvious that you've pressed the heal button. It sounds like a small thing, but this really helps because of the brightness of the yellow. It's easy to see in your peripheral vision, so you know without taking your vision off the action, the center of the screen, you're in the process of healing and you've not been hit. You may say, well, I don't need that because I know that if I've pressed the button or not, but it's not always that simple because any damage you take while you're healing will stop the progression. And you might not notice a little bit of damage sometimes, so the regen highlight is a really good idea. ADS sight update, I can't stress how awesome this is, and it's something that you don't really notice unless you put them side by side, but when you aim down the sight now, the iron sights and all the other sights in the game bounce around significantly less when you're strafing or moving forward, and this makes it just so much easier to track enemies, and this is made really apparent when you go from crouching to ADS. Not an obvious change, but you can really feel the difference in the general gameplay with this. All around, I'm super happy with this. It's created a few bugs though. I've seen a nasty bug on PlayStation which Broken Machine posted where the frame rate just completely tanks. And also a bug where you can't get revived and you can't press redeploy either. So your only option is to just leave the server. Hopefully they can be hotfixed as soon as possible because stuff like that is just terrible. But while there isn't any huge gameplay additions in this patch, there are some massive improvements to areas that were really frustrating, and taking that frustration out of the game just makes the overall experience way nicer and more fun. Now I also noticed that on Twitter, Tigger, who is one of the lead guys on the game, has said that he was personally more excited for the next patch after this one, saying that it's got just a bunch of really good improvements. So could we finally be about to see a fix for the netcode issues that we've been having since launch with time to death? Perhaps big improvements to visibility. And when asked about improvements we were likely to see, he responded with this: think about some of the top issues since launch and imagine 2 of these being significantly improved and fixed. Of course, this could mean quite a few things, but netcode and visibility, in my opinion, would be high on the list of guesses. If not, then perhaps assignments and being able to track them automatically or enable them when you're in a server. We'll see. Cheeky little tease there at the end. Anyway guys, that's it for today. Do let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you've played the new patch, how do you find it? Love it, hate it, whatever. And if you enjoyed this video, do leave a like, thank you. If you didn't enjoy it, dislike it. Subscribe if you want to see more, hit that bell, and I'll see you in the next one.